Let's now move on to Windows Phone OS. Now, actually, Microsoft has pretty much abandoned the idea of the Windows 8 phone or the Windows 8.1 phone. Now that they moved on to Windows 10, they're trying to make the core part of Windows 10 something that can be across all kinds of devices, including their big collaborative touch screens and IoT and your phone and whatever. So the traditional Windows 8 phone, they've kind of abandoned. But let's look and see what we can do about it in case you have targets that are still using those. So the Windows Phone 8, it's used on devices with large screens and 64-bit multi-core processors. It uses a shared Windows core. It has good storage support, removable storage support. It includes all the key components of Windows 8. It has Internet Explorer 10, background multitasking, Nokia map technology, near-field communication support. It supports, of course, native C, C++ code, and it has carrier control and their own sort of wallet elements. 128-bit BitLocker encryption. We have mobile or remote device management, which you can actually use in Microsoft Azure. You can have a mobile device management. It has support for UEFI, the boot process, which is sort of the new replacement for the old BIOS. It supports Windows updates, phone updates over the air. So you can update over the air your phone, your firmware. It has better app sandboxing and better VoIP and video chat integration. So all these great things. So why did Microsoft abandon it? Because nobody wanted to buy it. But anyway, you have the core OS services. And then you have Windows RT APIs. Remember, an API, application programming interface, is simply little buttons that a program can press to ask another program to do stuff. Anyway, so it has APIs for communications, graphics, and devices and printing. And it has Metro-style apps, which are that tile-based look that Windows 8, like the Surface, the Microsoft Surface Pro has, as well as the phones. And so you can have apps that are written in all sorts of things: C, C++, C#, Visual Basic, XAML, HTML, JavaScript. And then you can have like normal desktop apps that are HTML or C-based or VB-based, including the Win32 subsystem and .NET and Internet Explorer. So it is it's a very versatile device, and Microsoft wanted to have something that was an easy crossover between, say, a tablet like the Surface Pro and an actual phone. For whatever reason, people didn't really like it that much, so now they've gone to the Windows 10 core that can go across all sorts of devices. But you might still have people that run Windows 8.1 phones. Or you might have people running Windows 10 phones, and Windows 10 has an architecture that there's an intersection between the Windows 10 desktop and Windows 10 mobile. They basically have a common core that has all the kernel, the networking, the security, the policies, authentication, power management, encryption, storage devices, as well as a universal app platform, which basically allows apps to run on anything that is Microsoft. So you can have apps that are compiled specifically for desktops, apps that are compiled specifically for mobile devices, or apps that are compiled to run on either. Windows 8.1 and 10 both have a secure boot process, and they have actually 3 things that can be done to sort of protect against rootkits. I just want to zoom in a bit here. So starting in the very beginning, you start and the BIOS, the UEFI, is digitally signed. So you can't have a rootkit get in here because it won't match the signature. It then hands off to a trusted boot process. It loads the operating system, which basically there's a file, or there are files that manage the loading, which loads the kernels, which loads all the drivers, which loads all the files. And because all of these are digitally signed, it's hard to get a rootkit in there as well. And then you install third-party drivers, your anti-malware, and you sign in, you log in. In the meantime, this whole process, let me just zoom out, this whole boot process can have something optional called measured boot. Now, let me get back to this in a sec. Secure boot means only the very first things that start the boot process, they must be digitally signed by Microsoft. And they are backed by the Trusted Platform Module. This is a little chip on the motherboard that stores digital keys, private keys. And they have to be signed by Microsoft, or they have to be down the food chain from the Microsoft root certificate authority. So there's a chain of trust where the root must be Microsoft. Then once we've done that, during the trusted boot phase, the bootloader will verify, will digitally sign and check the kernel. The kernel in turn will verify the digital signatures of the startup components. And then optionally, if you want, everything that's been checked is saved on a log and can be verified against an outside third-party server called an attestation server that comes back and says, yep, all these signatures totally check, you are good. Or it can come back and say, nope, one of your signatures doesn't look right. So this is the secure boot process of both Windows 8, 8.1, Windows Phone, and Windows 10. Is it possible to hack Windows Phone? Yes, it is possible. Most people don't pay attention to it, but you could unlock the bootloader, you could enable root access, you could get into mass storage, you could install custom ROMs, custom read-only memory. There's a tool, there's a bunch of tools actually. Here's one example called Windows Phone Internals that allows you to do some of these very things we've talked about here. And so it shows an example of this. To secure Windows OS devices, make sure that you only download the apps from trusted sources. Make sure you've got passwords and a lock screen. You can clear out your browser history from IE. If you're on an unsecured network, avoid accessing password-protected websites. Make sure that your Windows 8 SIM is protected by using a PIN. You could use Exchange ActiveSync or device management policy for device encryption. Now this is only in a corporate environment. Exchange ActiveSync is a way for Microsoft Exchange to set some policy, and Exchange is the Microsoft email server, to set some policy for Windows devices. Make sure that if you are developing Windows 8 apps, you are using best practices and you are using code signing features with Trusted Boot. There are Windows OS tracking tools. We can see Follow Me, GPS Tracker, and actually a lot of these tracking tools work not only in Windows but on Android and iOS devices as well. So I can see here, if I do a zoom, that I can see a device that has been moving along and I can see where it's moving. So not a lot to pick from here in Windows 8. We'll see what happens with Windows 10 because that's very new and it's beyond the scope of this class to get into Windows 10. Most mobile hacking is going to be against Android because that's the easiest. But as we can see, there's some iOS and like this much Windows 8. So now let's move on to Blackberries.